Welcome to the Startup Support Surgery podcast, where we light the entrepreneurial spark in medics and healthcare professionals. Join me, Dr. Jo Watkins, GP, business coach and co-founder of The How People, on a journey to discover where your medical know-how meets the business world. This will help you find some clarity on how to balance work, passions and family so that you can gain more freedom and control over your life, but also continue to help people, which is actually why most of us went into medicine to start with. Embarking on this entrepreneurial adventure is not easy. It is a roller coaster of emotions, but it's hugely rewarding and exciting in the process. Drawing on my 20 years of blending medicine and business as a GP, I am here to share experiences, insights and lessons. Expect lively chats, expert interviews and real-life stories from medics who have taken their own path. Let's break free from traditional healthcare norms and explore more innovative ways of making a real difference to people's health and well-being, along with paving the way for a brighter future for us as healthcare professionals. Oh, don't miss my free PDF called From Stethoscope to Startup, which is an 11-page guide in the show notes full of practical help and advice. This is your roadmap to kickstarting your journey with us. Enjoy the show. I'm very excited about this episode with Dr. Jo Hartley. As you will find out as the show unfolds, we go back quite a long way and she really trusted in me 2 years ago and I will always be grateful to her for that. So, Jo Hartley is a career and life coach for doctors and a mum of 3. After 30 years of clinical practice, she left her career as a consultant in emergency medicine almost 2 years ago. She enjoys working in the NHS Professional Support and Wellbeing Service and runs a business offering one-to-one coaching and workshops, primarily supporting NHS consultants to build fulfilling and sustainable careers. In her free time, she loves walks in the countryside with her dog Mabel, connecting with friends, spending time with her family and planning their next family adventures. As I said, Jo was one of my first pilot clients who came on board and I helped her with her website and her branding alongside my virtual assistant, Karina, who has all the skills in that department. So my interesting fact about Jo Hartley, I have 2, one of which we are going to discuss as part of the podcast. She went to 7 schools before the age of 16. And as we discussed before we press record, that is definitely something that needs digging into a little bit more. But what I loved about this random fact is that there's a bit of a story, but you were in the parachuting club at university. Is that right, Jo?
Yeah. Hi, Jo. Oh, thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. Yeah. So it is lovely to be here. Okay, so yeah, I was in parachuting, and those of you who know me, it probably is not necessarily what you would necessarily first associate with my personality. I tend to be a little calmer than that, but no, I really enjoyed uni, and it was the first time I really felt like myself as an individual. And I had some good friends, and I went off and did a backpacking trip in Kenya for 5 weeks at the end of the first year, and I went with a guy. I mean, goodness knows how my parents let me go off just for 5 weeks backpacking with some random guy who they clearly didn't know very well, because they probably almost definitely wouldn't have let me go with him. And it just opened so many doors. I became incredibly much more confident, much more myself. And so, yeah, I fancied joining the parachuting club. And so that's what I did. It's not as, I did go off and do some jumps, but it was just great. We used to go so I was at uni in Southampton. We'd go up to Salisbury Plain. There were a lot of weekends when you couldn't jump. There was quite a lot of jump training. So it was just very sociable and exciting. And
Amazing.
Yeah, something that was an opportunity. I mean, that's the whole point of uni, isn't it? To do things that push you out your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And the ultimate feel the fear and do it anyway, jumping out of plane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, that's great. And thanks so much for your time here coming to chat to me today. I've been really excited about this because you were one of my first clients almost 2 years ago when I started sort of doing this properly. So should we wind back to that moment when we met and connected? Where were you, what were you feeling at that time? Where were you at? I think we met at Tom Dillon's conference, didn't we? So
we did, yeah.
Let's go there and then we'll go back further from that point. So where were we when we first connected?
So we first Well, I actually saw you on LinkedIn. I saw a couple of posts. I was aware of you in the background, and I knew that you'd done some coaching with Tom, and I think that's probably how the connections linked. And then we were at Tom Dillon's conference. Yes, we were having breakfast, and so it was random. I just happened to sit next to you, I think, at breakfast, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we got chatting. And I realised that you were keen on business coaching. And where was I at that point? So I had just left clinical practice. So I've done 30 years clinical practice. I was an emergency medicine consultant for 16 years. And I had taken a very brave, very bold, and really quite scary decision of leaving clinical practice predominantly for wellbeing reasons. I loved my job. I loved the place I worked, but it just wasn't working for me as an individual. I just got to the point where I was pretty burnt out, and so I left. And I think the conference literally 2 weeks later, and so I was just tentatively sitting there in that space of wondering what I'm going to do next. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I had built an educational portfolio over the previous 10 years or so. I worked as a program director, a head of school, and did some national work. And also, I'd started working in the professional support and wellbeing unit with resident doctors in training who need a bit of support along the way. And so I did have something to step into. So that was medical education. But what it looked like and where it was going, I wasn't quite sure, but it was going to provide a bit of income to keep me over while I decided what I wanted to do. So we were chatting, weren't we, really? And so I met you, and that was great. And as that time settled, and I think any time you make a career decision which isn't necessarily what you'd have chosen, I would have loved to have made it to retirement. That was my goal, and I just couldn't get there. I think after the dust settled, I had that bit of time of recognizing what I'd lost and what I needed. And the only real thing in my career that I was missing most was the coaching. I'd done Tom Dillon's course back in 21. I'd been working as a trust coach in addition to sort of my educational portfolio, and I absolutely loved it. And usual NHS kind of, no, we can't keep you on in that because your coach salary is paid for in your SPA time, usual kind of thing, not enough money to keep me going. So therefore I couldn't coach. And I started thinking that actually I wanted to coach, and I wanted primarily to offer kind of support to people like me that were going through this kind of thing, because actually I think going through the coaching course with Tom Dillon, you meet like-minded people, you recognize that life's journey is not always straightforward. Quite often when people are coming on courses like that, they're at a bit of a transition, and I felt I wanted to be in that space offering a bit of support, almost like I do with my resident doctors in training, but actually for the wider workforce, to work with them, to give them some time to think about their careers and their lives moving forward.
Amazing. And that is what you have done to date, isn't it? This is what you're up to. This is the day job now. You've made this happen.
Yeah, absolutely I have. So I was really lucky. I mean, that was an amazing connection that morning at breakfast. And I think I was thinking about it, and then your offer dropped into my LinkedIn mailbox, and I offered to be a VIP, and that's always a nice offer, isn't it? Oh, I'd like to be a VIP, and it's a bargain. So all of those marketing techniques got there, and I went, oh, maybe. But this was in July for me, and I'd already decided I was going to have the summer off, so I wasn't sure that was the right time for me. But another colleague who'd met you he messaged me and went, "Oh, Jo, this is exactly what you're looking for." And I think that's what it was. That's what I needed. And I think I told you I wanted it even before I spoke to you about it, didn't I? And then I can remember having a conversation with you as you were packing to go to Canada.
Yeah.
And you told me what it included, and I didn't really know, but what I knew the offer I was going to get from you was someone to walk alongside me as I started setting this up, because actually the more I'd looked into it, business was really daunting. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and you were also at that point sending an offer which actually was website and logo and all of those bits and pieces, which clearly going into a new business I was going to need immediately, and you were going to set that up for me. So, it did what it said on the tin, tick
Yeah.
box, got that sorted, had the summer off, and then we met in September to get things moving. And that's when I think, yes, the rose tinted spectacles dropped even further from my eyes, and I realized how much I didn't know. I mean, I didn't even know how to have a Google account, how to have, Google Drive, set up my own emails. I mean, it was so far back. I massively institutionalized. And I hadn't really seriously thought about what it entailed at all, because I knew you were going to sort that out for me.
Yeah.
Um,
And we did. But it's a lot, right? And I think what you've described there is exactly how people often feel. It's that, well, hang on a minute, I need a logo, I need a website, I need to get out there, I need to post on social media. I always get messages from people saying, well, I've got an Instagram account and I post on social media. And I'm like, well, let's go back a few steps, because before we even bother doing that, because that's a weight, right? You think, oh God, what am I going to post? I should post, I should do this, I should do that. So yeah, it was right at the beginning, and I was aware that there were lots of people offering websites, logos, business coaching. I think the record amount of money somebody told me they'd spent was $14,000, which equates to, about £8,000 for just the business coaching element. And then various packages, 3,000, 5,000 for websites. And I thought, this is crazy. And actually, it's only when you get going that you can you really know what you want to do and who you want to help. And I think the other thing, just to point out, that you said in that story that I think is really important for people to hear, is that what helped you make, those people that are in business already, what helped you make that decision that you wanted to work with me was actually a message from somebody else. And I bang on about this all the time. All you need is that one degree of separation, 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation, and somebody else to say to you, actually, this is what you need. Somebody you trust and who says, actually, this person is really genuine. They're not trying to just, sell you something that's not going to be right for you. This is what you need. And as soon as somebody says that you make that connection and you make that purchase. So from a marketing perspective, this is why it's important to put your offer out there, for people to know what you're doing who are in your wider circle, which is something I bang on about all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. And that's exactly what happened. And the fact it was, that offer, it was bespoke, it sounded exactly what I needed. And I think at that time, and it's become much more obvious over the last couple of years, but actually I was in a really quite tough place at that time. And so the feeling that I had somebody, an advocate to walk alongside me, and navigate what felt quite complicated, was really important. And I mean, you're great, aren't you, Jo? And it was easy. We connected from a medic perspective. You kind of got the things that I was bringing to the table, the perfectionism, it wasn't good enough, lots of try, all of that stuff. And the fact, actually, although I was to a certain degree niched, because I actually wanted to work with consultants, I had a skill set that helped me work with the whole of, I was working as a across the multidisciplinary team as a trust coach, and actually the need is massive. So therefore I wanted to do all of that, and but actually very, very rapidly you helped me focus down on my target niche. And in fact, I've been very lucky, I think, as from a business perspective, is that my niche works for me. And actually my first one that I hit on was, and I've thought about this before, am I lucky? Because I know lots of people who going into business do spend a bit of time doing that. But you know what? I've been working in that niche for the last 7 years. I've kind of developed that niche. That's where my skill set lies. The leaving clinical practice was not an easy decision. I was quite close to burnout back in 2016, and realised that the things were quite tough, and I wasn't sure I was going to get to the end of to get to retirement, really. And so I had spent quite a lot of time working out what I enjoyed, what I needed to do, what was right for me in life, and playing to my strengths, really, almost doing what I've encouraging other people to do, to craft a career that felt sustainable. And I got myself through another 7 years, and I developed some fantastic skills during that period of time. One of which was coaching, another of it was career development. So during that time, I built up that portfolio. So I wasn't that far off where I needed to be. I just needed to be clearer about it so I could market it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I love that. You've been doing it already. You've gone through that self-coaching process to work out what you want to be doing and who you want to be helping. And this combination of like lived experience plus, I say to anyone that is a hospital consultant, particularly, like your level of expertise in one area, A&E and ED at your level, you have so much to give to those people that are that little bit behind you. And I speak to people all the time that are wanting to leave clinical medicine. And I'd like to just come back to that point, because I work with various people. A lot of people are still in clinical medicine. There are people that love their clinical roles and they want something to go alongside it. I'd say that's predominantly the people that I work with. There are people that are looking to leave, people that are feeling burnt out. Which has another story. But how difficult was it for you to detach yourself from that identity and leave a career that you'd been in for 30 years?
Massive. And in some ways, Jo, I don't think I have. And so from that perspective, I work, all my clients are NHS doctors, actually. So and I'm employed still in my professional support and wellbeing unit. I am still employed by the NHS. It's just that the other half of my practice is my business, but my clients are NHS consultants, and I work with locally employed doctors as well. So I don't think I have. It's just that actually I'm allied to it. Am I in clinical practice? No. But in fact, over the last 2 years, I really genuinely feel that I have a really important role in supporting doctors to stay in work. Because
Yeah.
if we don't have a workforce that feels valued and supported and whatever, then we're not going to have a functioning NHS. And there's not enough investment in support services. So I've been able to reframe it. So whilst I'm not clinical, it's my lived clinical experience that makes me credible. And whilst Tom Dillon will tell you that you can coach anyone, I will tell you that doctors quite often like to talk to doctors, just as you're seeing in your coach business. I mean, I'm sure you can coach anyone in business, but actually there's a resonation, a getting it. There are things that come up as medics. And we really, really do. We are committed to our careers. I mean, you talked about before, didn't you? And I know you're possibly going to bring it up about the 7 schools, but as I talked to you right at the beginning, it's only as I've started reflecting as my time's gone on, and I've got a little bit more to think about what's been going on with me. There's been quite a lot of self-exploration over the last few years, because it has been incredibly challenging leaving. But actually, a lot of my self-worth was tied up in my academic achievement. I'd moved from school to school. I wasn't always terribly social. It took me a while to make friendship groups, but the one thing that continuously sort of supported me was my academic achievement. And so my career has always really been the same for me, or has felt similar to my self-worth. So if my career's going all right, my life goes all right. Now, I'm hugely well supported by a fantastic husband and 3 kids who I love very much. And, I'm really lucky that that's a stable, big support. But it wasn't enough from a self-worth perspective until I started to unpick why and understand the sort of traits that I've got. And yeah, it's and I think now I'm beginning to come in, so I'm going to take this into 2 pieces. So one is that journey about leaving. It took me a long time to realize it was there. It mixed up with menopause for me, lack of self-care, quite close to burnout, and actually just not thriving in a system. I quite like things to be in control. The ED is not the most controlled environment, but the NHS ED environment has just got to the point where actually it's very difficult to deliver the kind of quality care that I wanted to in that situation, and that did not resonate with my values. And it took me a long time to realize why I was finding it more challenging than other colleagues, because I was good at it. It's just that I used to take it home. It impacted on my life. And so I think the writing was on the wall. I had a sort of year or so of really not being very well in work, and I talked to a colleague in work, and I remembered, look, I don't want to be that person who's just hanging on to the last minute. I want to jump before I'm pushed. And actually, over about 6 months or so, I realised that I was going to need to leave. But I was lucky. I had this educational portfolio I could step into, and that provided a stepping stone for something to go to. And at the same time, another colleague offered me some education and training in a local trust, and that was something to do. And so I was able to build work in that period of time to feel like it was safe enough to jump. And I don't think I would have had the bandwidth to have built a business up during that period of time. I think that's, the thought of even setting up a business at any point never even, and I think I was running to stand still a lot of the time. And I said I was going to take it into two parts, and I can't remember what the second part
No,
of what I was going to say from a journey perspective. But I think it's taken me a long time to give. Oh, I don't know what it is. It's give myself permission to enjoy the journey. I don't feel anymore that I have to do something better. One of those features of burnout is that classic early stage of burnout, people do more to prove they're good enough. I had that sort of slight imposter syndrome, the inner critic sitting on my shoulder. You're not really enjoying this. Is it because you're not great? So I did more and more and more to prove to myself I was good enough. And actually, what I've had to do now is I did a little bit of that when I stepped into my new business, and I took on lots of clients in the professional sport and wellbeing unit. I set up a new business. That actually was a hugely challenging time because I wasn't particularly well resourced going into it in the first place. And I had not recognized how hard the business journey would be, and how much learning and how much of those things like perfectionism and all those things that you hold secure, your expert knowledge. We talk about in career theory, we're talking about career capital. We talk about career capital. And I'd suddenly worked out of one place where I had a lot of career capital and self-worth tied up in my professional role. And actually, I was then walking to a situation where I was, you've left clinical practice, have you? And there was quite a lot of judgment, probably most from myself.
Yeah.
But I spent a long time trying to prove that I was good enough, and it was okay.
I think this is fascinating, and this will resonate with a lot of people. And I hear you loud and clear. And we were saying before we hit record that I'm seeing a lot of people at this early stage of looking into themselves a little bit more, self-reflection, understanding, looking at their past. And there are two buckets of people in my life. There's one bucket of people that are like, oh, why would you want to go and pick that apart? Like, why would you want to think about that? Like, you just, these things happen, and aren't we lucky, and move on. And then there's another bucket of people that are really intrigued about this sort of stuff. And for me, I found that self-reflective piece really helpful to understand who I am. And I think if we're going out there in a world where we're trying to help others, we have to have a really true understanding of who we are. And I want to link that into something that you said at the beginning about coaching and having an advocate and having somebody to walk by our side. I think what I see in medics is that we have this path, right? We have this very linear path into an education system, but mostly along the way, there's somebody around, kind of along the way, whether it's teachers, whether it's mentors, whether it's parents, whether it's friends and colleagues and our peers at university, and then through our junior doctor years. And even when I was doing GP Reg training, there was a load of us that did it together. And then I think there's this period of time where everyone kind of settles into these like jobs for life. You become a consultant, you become a partner, and then you kind of forget to check in about stuff with people, and then normal life takes over, and then you have kids, whatever. And there's nobody by your side unless you've got your supportive family around you. Great. But from a medical point of view, or if you are in business or whatever your walk of life, you have your appraisal every year where you just like rock up and try and make sure you filled in all the right forms.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is for all medics to have some coaching? Or how, can you explain to somebody the value of coaching in terms of that advocate and mentor helping you along?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things about what coaching does, but fundamentally what it does is it creates time in your week where you can sit and think and it gives you the opportunity to explore things in a safe space. A coach's job, I don't need to know anything about what you're doing or what's going on for you, because my job is to facilitate your thinking, and not thinking at a superficial level. It's actually the opportunity to think a bit deeper about, why would I like to do that, what it's going to give me, what direction I'd want to move in, what is it actually I fundamentally want. There's so many of the people that I have a coaching session with are looking for, I want to go and do another job, or I'm a bit bored with this, where do I want to go? But if we can pull some of those layers backwards, often it's about, I don't feel like I'm using my skills. I don't feel like I'm able to be my best person in work anymore. Or it can be that I actually want to spend more time at home with my family, but I can't give myself permission for that because it feels selfish. Self-care is selfish in the medical world, and it's most definitely not. If you don't look after yourself, how can you look after other people? And I think it's that recognition that the NHS unfortunately does not look after its staff. And just because of the workload and the pressures, the natural trajectory in our careers is to work harder and harder and harder. And actually, the thing that gets pinched, because family tends not to, if you've got kids and dependents, that doesn't get pinched. The thing that gets pinched is you, your personal identity, your time, your sense of self-worth and understanding. So coaching is an opportunity to reset, to regroup, and look at what you want to do. And often it isn't big things. So a lot of the conversations I will have is about permission to look at the hours that you're working and recognize, just reflect. I'm working every night and every weekend, doing admin. Okay, my hours are only such and such, but I'm doing all of that. And it's permission to take what you need.
Yeah.
Permission to make tiny tweaks. They are often really big ones. And I think sometimes the word career coach is worrying. They don't want to change career. The majority of people I work with don't want to change degree to their career. They love their work they do. They just want to get back to doing stuff that they really enjoy. And it's all that noise around that. And it's an opportunity sometimes to develop skills and self-awareness and self-understanding. The pressure in management and leadership roles,
Yeah.
with that conflict. So that's an opportunity to talk about. So it really is. It's that, think back to when you had a really good educational supervisor during your career. It's a little bit of that. It's that sort of going, okay, that's interesting. Where are you going now? What are the reasons for that? What do you need next? And so you're getting that opportunity to regroup. And it may be that you're giving yourself permission to have some better time at work and give more time to your family. It might be that actually you have that urge that's not being fulfilled in your day job. So perhaps you want to build a business or a niche or a focus. Or perhaps what you want to go and do is do pottery and painting, because as medics, we had to lose loads of our stuff that was great all
Yeah.
along the way. And actually, that's the bit that you need to re-energize you. And so, so quite a lot of our conversations really is talking about energy. What's the good stuff in your day or your week, and what's the stuff that you'd like to get rid of, and do a bit more of the good stuff and do a bit less of the stuff that drives you balmy.
Yeah. And actually, medics love nothing more than having to do that for somebody else. So if you need this in your life, if you sign up to a session with Jo or with Belinda or Katia or any number of the amazing coaches that are in my world, if you want a recommendation, just send me a message and I will signpost you, because there are lots and lots of great people out there. And you sign up for 2 or 3 sessions, then you have that accountability that is what you're doing. And it's almost like gifting yourself the time, like you would do with a fitness trainer or somebody that was helping you organize something. You allow yourself permission to have that time. And it's like shining a light on some things that are really obvious sometimes. And I have friends that have now normalized doing blood results at home in the evening, for example. And that's not okay, to be doing over and above, practically another day's work on top of their full-time job, but it's become normal. And I think when things are normalized in our lives. We sometimes need somebody else to highlight that on, and it's not about telling people what to do. It's
Oh
about
no, you
showing
can't
people
tell
the way.
someone what to do, because actually ultimately, and medics are so resourceful, and in fact almost too self-sufficient and self-resourceful. I mean, the presenteeism, we don't even give ourselves permission to go off sick quite often. So how are we going to give ourselves permission to have some time to ourselves to do what feels really, really, a bit airy fairy in
Yeah,
ourselves? Why do I need to be self-aware? Why do I need to know any of those things? Often when people seek out coaching is when life's got really quite tough.
yeah,
And in fact, what we should be doing is having a regular review, proactive, tiny steps. You like to talk
yeah.
about this in business, don't you? Small steps are easy, constantly refining. And what I've noticed in the last 2 years, so I spent my first year building that business. I had fantastic support from you as a business coach, but also really good support from Karina to build my logo, to do my website. And it was all done and dusted within about 9 months, which was great. But actually, it was really hard work. And
Mm,
I'd kind of realized that I'd gone from, in order to sort of prove my self-worth and I would be okay outside my clinical practice, I'd taken on far too much. And
mm,
actually, I was replaying those same old habits of doing more and more and more to prove myself. And actually, I wasn't spending enough time doing it. So I've spent a lot of time this year looking at what I need. I went on your business retreat and it was great. And my vision board, which should all have been about business, was about more self-care and more time for me and doing more of the things that actually, I'd had friends going, oh, I think you're retiring or something. Have you got time for coffee? I'm going, oh no, I'm really sorry, I'm really busy, I can't. And so this year I'm desperately trying, and it's still habits of a lifetime.
yeah,
But my accountability partners, you say there's a degree of accountability in that, recognizing. And so, I talk to people and go, you're still not done it yet? No, have you? Well, yes, I have. So I will build it in, I will timetable it in. But this year for me is about enjoying that journey. Okay, I don't need to do any more. I've got really fulfilling work that I think makes a difference. So it ticks my sense of purpose, it brings an income in, it's great. But actually, I am keen to spend more time with my family. My boys are getting older. I'm at that stage where, well, I'm close to being sandwiched like lots of us younger generation, but I've got boys that are beginning to leave. But actually, it's important to spend quality time with them when I can. They are,
mm,
they need me to be my best self. And actually, I've spent a lot of time not being with them at weekends and stuff because of the rota I've done. And so it's, yeah, I'm trying and
good work.
enjoying.
And I
Yeah.
know that you have your dog walk every morning. You've just said you're meeting friends for coffee. It's prioritizing that stuff is really important. And I have to remind myself all the time. So it's okay to find this stuff hard, but
Yeah.
actually we need to do this stuff to look after ourselves. You talked about hard, and I want to go back to that because I want to talk a little bit about the sort of good things and the flip sides of business. You talked about it being hard. What are the hardest things that you found? What have you found difficult? And then we'll go into what you've enjoyed.
What have I found hard? Okay, so it was like opening Pandora's box, how much I needed to do. Literally just the amount of workload. And you encourage us to do a small amount every day. But I'd already filled my life up by then with other work. And actually, I couldn't do a little bit every day. It was so out of my comfort zone that I didn't like feeling at the beginner. So I felt I should be running before I could walk. And I felt impatient with myself. I found the fact that it didn't switch off like the rest of my work did, that I was waking up in the morning thinking, oh, I should do a bit on there's lots of shoulds, I should do a
Mm,
bit on this, I should do that. And actually, it required a different bit of my brain. It required quite a creative process, a bit of writing, those logos, all of that stuff, which is so, I am not a particularly interestingly, I'm probably more creative than I think I am. but it's not my, most of us are left-brained. Most of us, in our medical roles are very linear, tick box, go through all of those things. And I just think some of my preferences are that way anyway. And so to sit back and take the big picture and going, what colours would you like to have on your website? Oh my goodness. How do you do that? Actually, I was quite creative about that. I found a picture I liked and used those colours, and it's worked really well. I love my website colours.
And you now have a brand jumper, can I point out?
Yeah, no, it was exciting. Well, you know what, Jo? I had my colours done last week. All my friends were having their colours done 20 years ago, but I was always too busy to do something like that. So I treated myself to go and have my colours done. And I'm wearing a colour today. And yeah, you can all look at it and see whether but actually, yes, it is. And it's one of my colours. Who would have known?
Amazing. So the creative process, all of that stuff, new things like, say, Pandora's box. There's so much stuff that you don't know is going to be thrown at you. But what about the good things? I feel sometimes like I spend a lot of time pissing on bonfires and telling everybody how hard it is to run a business, which is not very good, A, for my business, or B, for people generally. But it is, there are good things, right? So what have you enjoyed about the process?
There's loads of good things about it. And some of the things that I got from it, I didn't know I wanted. So you are fab and you get it. You get it. When we're being medic in our perfectionist type left brain heads and, trying to tell us that, just small steps, good enough, all of that stuff. And that's really important to have that accountability, that advocacy as you're moving forward. I was not anticipating, and as I started, I wasn't anticipating your e-learning, your modules that you do, and that was fabulous. So for someone like me who actually, from a learning perspective, quite likes to have it all out there, those resources I can move on in my own time, that was really grounding, and that was great. And it starts right back at the beginning. And for me, that's actually how I like to learn things. So that was great to do that. Interestingly, the website stuff, of course, was happening far too early. And I was doing that with Karina and then having to come back to the beginning. And I found that quite challenging. I still find my social media difficult. I'm pretty settled on LinkedIn now because it feels the most professional of all of them. It was the least out of my comfort zone, and I'm on there. I've done some writing for it. I've now got some autonomy going on, and I think gradually some of the things that I found more difficult, I've just organically let grow. I've not pushed myself too hard because life goes on, doesn't it? And there have been times in the business where I felt massively energized. I can move things forward, but there's also times when I've had to park it for a little while because it takes too much out of myself. And I've been really, really lucky that I've been able to let it grow organically. One of the things really early on about my niche is I was then able to use an opportunity. So whilst I have private clients through my business, actually, I was able to use the discussions I had with you and the opportunity I got from a local trust to do educational workshops. And I now do coaching for consultants in a local trust, and that actually is quite a big proportion of my business. And so I've had income coming in, and that's given me, it's given me people to work with to build up my understanding, my core skill set. And so I've been able to evolve it organically in a way that actually feels very true to myself. And I think you've given me permission for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's able to be my own journey in a way that is what I need. I didn't have time, to be honest, to do it full time.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things, isn't it? That flexibility. People come into business sometimes for flexibility and freedom. And initially, it can actually be about creating a job that's even harder than the one that you had because no one else can do it. But ultimately, if you build what you want, which is why even when people come to me quite further down the line, I'm like, right, let's rewind right back. Like, what is this all about? I started a granola business and nobody ever checked in with me about my values, what I was trying to do, what I was creating. I was like, I want to run a business outside being a medic. I want to be able to spend more time with my family. I want to be able to travel. If somebody had asked me, I would have come out with all of those questions, all of those answers at the time. And what I was actually doing was creating a monster that required, me to employ people and to run a factory just outside Swansea and to never, ever go away on holiday and to never be with my kids and never even be able to cook them a meal in the oven because it was just full of granola all the time. And, it just didn't align. But no one ever asked me those questions. So, by digging into this stuff at the beginning, hopefully you are going to build something that is robust enough to grow with you as you grow and learn along the way. And it's not quick, but it's all possible. And it's just an absolute joy to see you 2 years down the line, which is still early days in business, doing exactly what you want to do, where helping people in the way that you want to help them, and living a life that is aligned with you being a mum to 3 growing boys and actually enjoying what you're doing, which it feels like that's the case now. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it's predominantly true, isn't it, Jo? There are still some of those traits within me that pushes me harder, feels I need to do that, all of that stuff. And I have a real tendency to overwork, partly because I love my job. It's really interesting. I did this job on the side when I was an emergency medic and used to think this was the easy bit of my job. I now bring it into the big part of my life and realize that actually the work we do working with people is tough actually sometimes, and it's really important to be my best self going into those conversations. So I'm learning to live and recognize that I need to re-energize, that I need to do that, and giving myself permission to do it. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel selfish anymore. It feels a necessity of part of my life.
A non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. And I think, and I was just thinking about this when we were sort of knowing that we were going to be talking today. What is it? I've worked with a couple of clients recently who've just finished their coaching sessions, and they've come to a place of acceptance. And I think that is actually quite a comfortable, they're happy with their lives, they're happy with what they're doing, they've done some tweaks from it, but they've got to a point where they're comfortably resting. We're all, as medics, going to drive ourselves quite hard in different directions because that's what we naturally do. But we're doing it from a position of strength. You're happy with what's going on, you're happy with, and that's a much, much more comfortable place to be.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we wrap up, I always ask everybody, you've been brilliant at sharing the highs, the lows, and everything in between. But what would be your advice to somebody in this sort of wanting to go into the business space, wanting to start their own thing? What would be your advice to your kind of early entrepreneurial self?
Well, I think I did it right, to be honest, because I hooked up with you really early on, and that actually is what I needed. I had no idea what I didn't know, and there's no way I would be here doing what I'm doing now in that comfortable space of growing the business how I want to if I hadn't been working with you. So I've had that accountability, I've had the skill set, and I've had that opportunity to move forward. And to be honest, and not only that, Jo, and the thing that I wasn't sure I wanted was the community. But again, that's that recognition that it is it's really isolating to do this by yourself because you are doing something a bit strange, a bit different from the majority of medics. So that's been quite self-affirming as well too. You've got some lovely people that I have met along that way. And also, there's an element of, you're the business coach and doing it. And if I've been taking some time or a break, and you're very supportive when we take time and a break, but I've been able to go to say to someone, oh no, I'm just going to, I'm not going to do it for a couple of months ago. Yeah, I know that's okay too. So there's a naughty school kid back at the back of the class as well, which again is really lovely because it's lovely to be a part of a group. And then also, then you've got the wins when you see someone else do something amazing, and be so proud of us all doing it together. So I think my 3 are almost within that. Apart from, I think, what would I let myself know is just recognize that actually often the reason why you're coming into business is often from a place of challenge. And actually that journey is far harder than you would anticipate. And it's going to be worth it, but it's not going to be easy. And actually just be very gentle with yourself. There'll be good days, but there'll be days when actually you just need to switch off and put it on a shelf and park it for a little while until you're feeling more resourced and ready.
Brilliant. It's going to be worth it, but it isn't going to be easy. I love that. That's a great place to finish on. Jo, you've been an absolute superstar. Thank you for everything and for all your kind words and for sharing all of your knowledge, and your journey into and the future is huge for you, I think. You know, you don't strike me as somebody that's winding down to retirement anytime soon. So I think the next 10 years, who knows what you'll do.
Thank you, Jo. Oh, thank you so much. I'm very, very lucky to have worked with you. It's been a really, really fantastic part of my journey. And you're a friend as well as a business coach these days as well.
Yeah.
So
Well, the feeling is mutual, and it was all over breakfast, which is great. So there we are.
Well, it's exactly amazing what happens over your breakfast.
Thanks, Jo. All
right. Thank you, Jo. Take care. Bye.
Bye. I hope this episode has sparked some new ideas or challenged your thinking. Transitioning from medicine to business is not easy. It's about adapting our skills while embracing the unknowns of entrepreneurship. It can be nerve-wracking, but remember, you are not alone on this journey. Please feel free to reach out to me via direct message on LinkedIn or Instagram, or just shoot me an email at jo@bendylegs.com for support. And don't forget to grab the free PDF from the show notes, From Stethoscope to Startup, which is your go-to guide and resource for diving into entrepreneurship. Many thanks for tuning in. I will see you next time. Thanks for spending your precious time with me.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.